Welcome back, Faith Walkers. We're going to dive into a teaching together on when you've outgrown a season. So this will help you pay attention to some undercurrents, some undertones that you might be experiencing when where you've been no longer fits where you're going. And that puts you in an interesting tension of not being entirely sure of how to navigate this transition. You know you're straight in the middle of a transition, but you're not quite sure how to cleanly and clearly navigate this season, which makes it difficult for you to show up and also lead likely those that are connected to you. So we're going to dive into this together. This is a great moment to invite someone to partake, to listen, and you can also subscribe and share as well. But we're going to talk about, I first want to just open, we hear Isaiah 43:18 a lot. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive and know it? And God is doing new things all of the time, okay? But it is on us to discern what those new things are. And one of the hardest things about following God is that he rarely announces a new season with a calendar invitation. Like he doesn't just say, here's what we're doing, here's all the directions you need, here's everything that you're going to need for the journey. Like he doesn't give you all of that information up front, right? He is more like, go to this place that I'll show you. Go to this place. When you go to this place, I'll show you more. That's likely what you've experienced before too. And more often than not, he begins changing you before he changes your circumstances. And that's not always where we look for feedback. That's not always where we look for evidence of advancement or of progress. In fact, we often really underestimate how God's investment in us is proof enough of his investment in our future, right? Because God doesn't invest where he doesn't expect a harvest or where he doesn't expect a return. So maybe you begin noticing that what once satisfied you no longer does. Like you used to be pretty content. You even felt grace for where you were. You felt like it was making sense. You were hearing God where you were, but suddenly you're no longer satisfied where you are. Conversations maybe that once felt normal suddenly feel draining to you. They don't feel where you really feel excited, expectant. You don't feel necessarily seen or heard, and it just starts to feel different. Again, not good, bad, right, or wrong. You're just noticing subtleties, okay? Maybe opportunities that you once prayed for, these don't excite you the way they would have, okay? You find yourself perhaps craving depth instead of distraction, or wisdom instead of just information that you could get on the internet, and formation instead of just simply feeling inspired. You don't want to just have motivating good information or ideas. You actually want to be transformed. You want to be changed. You want to be advanced. You want to progress, right? And sometimes these subtle shifts that we're noticing, we might interpret that initially as burnout, right? Sometimes we think that something is terribly wrong, right? But what if nothing is wrong? What if nothing is wrong? What if God is simply doing a new thing? He's working Isaiah out in real life, right? And the first place he's doing it is inside of you. He's doing a new thing inside of you, and that is new to you, and that is new to everyone connected to you. So you have to be gentle with you and give yourself some grace here. Isaiah, in this passage, wasn't speaking to people who were merely just changing locations, if you read further. He was speaking to people who needed a new vision. You know, sometimes when we've been in a place, when we've endured much, when we've suffered much, when we've really waited long, we can get acclimated or attuned to that season or to that way of being. Like if we've been in seasons of warfare, we can just get so familiar with fighting that we don't know what it's like to not be fighting, right? And so that can be a new thing that God is doing. He's taking us out of just constantly fighting or healing or different things into seasons of harvest, into seasons of plenty, into seasons of celebration. These are different expectations. These are different experiences, right? So Isaiah wasn't speaking to people who merely were just changing locations. He was speaking to people who needed vision. And we always need vision. We know that without it, we perish. So God wasn't simply promising a different future. He was inviting them to perceive what he was already doing. And this is one of the ways that you can really build trust and confidence in God. He will give you prophecy. He will give you revelation. He will give you wisdom. He will give you provision. He will give you all of this and kind of keep building it together. And you see that he who promised is faithful. You see that he is good. You see that he leads you, he guides you, he establishes you, he covers you, he protects you, right? He instructs you in the way to go, okay? So sometimes we don't miss the next season because God isn't moving. God's always on the move. We miss it because we're still trying to hold on to the last season, or we're trying to interpret this season in the context of last season when that might not be the right context or container at all. So here's what you do have to know. This is actually very normal. Growth changes your appetite. Growth changes your appetite, okay? Hebrews 5:12 says, solid food is for full-grown men. Right? We start on milk and then we move to solid food. Solid food is for full-grown men, okay? One of the clearest signs that you've grown is that your appetite changes. Literally, things that used to satisfy you, things that you used to crave, maybe things that you used to pursue, things that you used to enjoy, those no longer, you no longer have hunger for those. You no longer have interest in those. You're no longer pursuing those, right? The writer of Hebrews wasn't criticizing people for being hungry, okay? He was inviting them into maturity. Babies need milk, right? When you think about, I like to think about it this way, your relationship, the amount of years that you've been in a relationship is how old you are in the spirit. Not literally, but it's kind of funny to think about. Like if you are literally a born-again believer, you're a baby in Christ, right? Sometimes you've been walking with the Lord for 3 years. You wouldn't expect a 3-year-old to do what a 33-year-old could do, or a 33-year-old to do what a 63-year-old could do. You get the idea? So sometimes that helps you in context. Why are you expecting at 3 to have all of the trust and the development and the capacity that you might not even have encountered yet or even dabbled in yet, okay? So the writer in Hebrews here is not criticizing people for being hungry. He's inviting them into maturity, and this is what God is always doing with us. And maturity is natural in the kingdom, right? We are designed to mature. So the same, when we think about babies needing milk, adults need nourishment that actually strengthens them. And the same is true for spirituality, right? There comes a point where you stop looking for messages that simply make you feel better. Sometimes, like, that's what we might think the standard is for going to church or for fellowshipping with other believers. We think that going into the space and hearing a really exciting milk toast message, right, is something that's going to be enough to satisfy us. But if you actually hit enough life, if you actually walk through enough, you're going to need more. You're going to know that like a nice sounding message is not going to cut it. You're going to need more than that, right? You're not looking for something that's just going to make you feel better. You need something like a strong prayer that is powerful and effective, right? So you begin looking for truth that actually changes you, not that just sounds good to you. Especially if it only sounds good to your soul. That's not what you're looking for, right? You want to experience correction that no longer feels offensive, right? Like you want people that are willing to say things to you because they love you. They're not going to enable your dysfunction. They're not going to enable you to go in a negative direction. They are actually going to lovingly correct you. And that's what they allow other people to do for them. That kind of stuff suddenly starts feeling valuable to you. Conviction becomes a gift instead of a threat to you, right? You stop asking, will you encourage me today? And you begin asking, Lord, what are you forming in me today? How can I partner with you? How can I represent you well? That's maturity, not because you know more per se, right? But because you're willing to become more. You're willing to communicate and express more fully the Christ-likeness that's been developed in you, and you continue to let God work out his nature in, through, and all around you, which usually takes pressure. It usually takes getting uncomfortable, okay? So one of the things too, not only does your appetite change, but growth will produce discernment, okay? Philippians 1:9 says that your love may abound yet more and more in full insight and understanding and discernment. So notice that Paul here is not praying for love alone. He is praying for love with discernment. We just did a masterclass inside Courage Co on holy detachment. And I was like, holy Moses, because this was such a revelatory teaching. We learned that sometimes we're afraid to detach, or we learn that detachment is bad because as humans, we are supposed to attach, right? Especially when you're young, like you learn to survive through attaching to parents, right? And not all of us learned, if you've ever studied attachment styles, not all of us learn healthy ways to connect, to attach with other humans, and that can play out into dynamics into adulthood, right? But just like we need to attach, we need to know how to detach for our own good. And that is not bad, that is actually holy, okay? And when we don't know how to detach from things, we get entangled in things, and that can become life as we know it. And so this was a very, very rich masterclass. The replay is available. It's available for all of August inside Courage Co if you do want to go listen to that. But Paul is saying here, love with discernment. Don't love with blindness. Don't love blindly. Don't love with denial, right? This is significance. Immature love says yes to everything. Right? Insecure love is easily moved based on not wanting to disrupt the status quo or disappoint somebody. Okay? Mature love knows when to say yes, okay? And when to say no. The Bible says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Everything else is from the evil one. You don't want to be in that evil place, okay? Mature love partners with what God is doing in real time. Immature love confuses compassion with responsibility, not the same thing. Mature love understands boundaries. As God matures you, your discernment will grow. You will be able to discern how God is helping you navigate things in the natural spiritually, right? You're having your spiritual senses trained, okay, through intentional practice and use. So you begin recognizing what produces life and what is quietly draining life out of you, right? And you're not becoming critical or cynical or suspicious here. You are becoming trustworthy. If God is giving you wisdom, if he's giving you revelation, if he's giving you instruction, are you somebody he can trust with that? He's giving it to you, demonstrating that he trusts you, but are you somebody he can trust? You'll get to decide. As you're going, not only does your appetite change, and also your discernment will be strengthened if you're really trusting the Lord. What also can happen is your tolerance to things changes. Okay, Hebrews 5:14. Their senses are trained by practice to discriminate and distinguish. All right, have you noticed that the things you once tolerated, you simply can't anymore? You used to be able to go into some environments. You cannot even go into those environments. You used to be able to listen to some music and you can't even turn it on anymore. You used to be able to watch some type of programming, but you can't. You used to be able to read this kind of material. You can't do that. You used to be able to just be on social media. Now you can't just be on social media in the same kind of way, right? Not because you've become difficult, but because you become discerning. You no longer find entertainment and gossip, let's say, or you don't enjoy constantly complaining or being around people that do that as leisure, right? You feel comfortable in environments where you can just be alone, be still, connect with the Lord. You feel uncomfortable around manipulation. You recognize unhealthy patterns more quickly. Okay? That is not arrogance. That is actually you maturing. And discernment is not suspicion. You're not looking for ways to judge, criticize, condemn somebody else. You are looking to steward well the season that you're in, the resources that have been entrusted to you, your spirit, your soul, your being. You are looking for how to navigate the season that you're in. So don't confuse settling, okay, with stretching. They are not the same thing, although in your body they might feel similar. This is where many people become confused, and it's easy to be confused here because both settling and stretching can feel uncomfortable. Okay? They both, however, produce different fruit. We don't always kind of like look and explore this all the way through, but they do produce different fruit. James 1:2 says that the testing of your faith produces the power of endurance. The testing of your faith produces the power of endurance. So sometimes you're uncomfortable because God is stretching your capacity. I remember a season where I was building, and I was clear that the mission was to be building. However, I don't know where this thought came from or this idea came from, but I just had this thought or this expectation that I would build. And then once I kind of completed a certain build, then I would have, like a refreshing period or like a reprieve, or I'd be able to like take a beat, right? But that like refreshing or that rest or that kind of exhale never came. And I just thought, what is going on? And then the Lord kept adding more to my plate. And I thought, this is really interesting because there's still some part of my being, that my soul, that is craving just this, but it wasn't coming. And I was like, Lord, in my mind, this would be really great if we sort of divided this, like if we focused on this in this season and created like a little more space and a little more, just space is the only word I can think of. If we just created more space for this to evolve, for this to breathe a little bit, then we can shift into this thing. And God's like, I hear you, right? I hear that you think that that'd be a good idea, but it was more of a command. Like I am asking you, I'm commanding you to build. This is the time to build. And you don't delay here. You do not slow up. You do not slow down. You build. You're building this thing that I'm telling you to do. And it wasn't like a casual build. I was building many things all at the same time, including a full-on certification program. So think building curriculum times, I don't even know, decades, right? In a season. And that felt like a lot. I was in a ministry school program at the time. I was working full time. I was coaching full time. I was building so many things all at the same time and still being a human and making time for relationships and other things. But it was a huge lift, right? And so what I started to realize was that God didn't need me to understand why it had to be that way or why it felt like that, or why I wasn't getting the relief. But what he taught me to do was to rest in him in the midst of these capacity drills. I started to understand in time that he was stretching my capacity. So every time I kept thinking and I kept coming up what I thought was a wall, he kept expanding my capacity. And then I came up on another edge and he kept expanding my capacity. And I just started to see, you're doing a thing here. You're doing a new thing. And that thing is called stretching. And these are capacity drills. And every time I think that I don't have capacity, you keep giving me supernatural capacity as I obey you. And now suddenly I'm able to do more than I could before because I kept trusting you and you kept equipping me. Imagine that. So God didn't need me to understand. He needed me to recognize that obedience is better than sacrifice, that I don't have to like what it feels like to obey him, and that this is stretching. Welcome to stretching. This is what stretching feels like. And I think too, back in the days when I did gymnastics, they used to have us put together two mats that were stacked up. So they were like big stacks. You would put them side by side and then you would do a split. And the whole idea was you weren't just going to do a normal split. You were going to split beyond the split so that when you do like a split in the air, you have a full split. That never felt good. Not ever one time. No one looked forward to it. Nobody wanted to do that. And we had to start our day with stretching. So think about even in the winter, you're going to a cold gym that's barely warmed up. You got all your sweats on still because I was in the Midwest, so it was like snow outside and freezing. And then you go into a big freezing warehouse and the first thing you're supposed to do is stretch. None of that sounds like a good idea, but the more you kept practicing stretching, the stretchier you got. the more flexible you became. So God was helping me develop capacity through all these capacity stretching drills so that not only did I have more capacity, but I was more flexible to his leadership. Very, very powerful there. Hopefully you caught what I was saying. So sometimes you're uncomfortable because God is stretching your capacity, right? He's asking you to trust him more, to lead differently, to speak up, to take responsibility, to risk obedience. That's holy stretching, okay? And you don't want to run from that. Like, I could have easily not obeyed. I could have easily said, this is too much for me. I could have easily said, I can't do this, and talked myself out of things, but that's not what God was telling me to do, right? So you have to sometimes develop staying power because God is developing something in you. But then sometimes, okay, you're uncomfortable because you've actually stopped growing. All right? The conversations are no longer challenging you. The environment requires you to shrink to stay in it. You've become more committed to maintaining what was than becoming who God's calling you to be. And that's not stretching, that's settling, that's drifting, okay? And those two things require very different responses. And when you are settling, it's going to make you uncomfortable in a different way. It's going to make you usually frustrated, irritable, moody, resentful because you're not growing. And then you'll start resenting other people that are choosing to, which is not a them problem. That's a you invitation, okay? An example of this is Israel. We've heard this a lot, but Israel could not catch the vision. They could not get the vision of God doing a new thing. They could not imagine a different life. We see this in Numbers 13. We seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers. This is telling you your identity is what produces your purpose. It's what produces your destiny, okay? Your identity is directly connected to your purpose and to your destiny. So when you don't see yourself properly, you can't see your purpose or your destiny, your mission on the planet properly. So the promised land here is usually what is made the problem, okay? But that wasn't the problem. Their thinking was the problem. Their lack of vision was the problem. Their low expectations were the problem. If you were in Kingdom Builders and Courage Co., we just did a prophetic encouragement that a lot of this next season that we're moving into, it's a time of harvest. It's a time of promises fulfilled. But prior to entering in, especially as we enter into these fall months, right, you have to raise your expectations. You've gotten too comfortable with the way things are. You've gotten too accustomed to things continuing to be this way, right? That you've got to turn up your expectations. You no longer believe what you need to believe to enter in. You're still thinking like you're never going to make it. You're still thinking sort of like a victim, right? So if God has already changed the location like he did with the Israelites, right? He still needed them to change their identity. Their thinking was the problem here. So they were physically in their bodies free, but mentally they were still slaves. And that's what it can be like. Again, when you are constantly, let's say that you've gone through years of warfare, me too. When you've gone through years of warfare, you can kind of like be on the lookout for like warfare, the next thing to fight. And what if God is ushering you into a season of fulfillment? Are you actually ready for that? Is your heart healed enough to receive? Is it refreshed and revived enough to make space for the new thing that God is doing? Or would you sabotage it because you're going to fight it? You're going to resist it. You're not going to make space for it. You won't be able to nurture it. You won't be able to support it because you're not even expecting it. You've gotten so used to not having the thing that you don't even know what it would feel like to have it. You don't even want to believe for it anymore. So mentally, like you can be physically free, but mentally still a slave. You could be, for example, out of that job. You could be out of that relationship and still feel like the person that was oppressed by it, if that was the dynamic, right? So how many of us are asking God for a new season while still carrying an old mindset or old habits? Your old habits will not help you in this new season unless you're refining them. Right? You can enter into a new assignment and still think like the person who hasn't grown into that yet. I like to think about David with Saul, right? Like David knew that it was his time to step into a battle. He knew that it was his time because he received all this revelation and prophecy about how he was going to be king. So he knew that if he was going to go face Goliath, it wasn't his time to die. So if it wasn't his time to die because he was going to be king, then this was his time to take out the giant in the name of the Lord, because the Lord was going to fight for him, right? And so when Saul was asking David to wear his armor, David thought, no, because I didn't train in that armor. My identity is not in that. I can't wear that because that would actually sabotage what I know how to do. And I need to do what I know how to do with the Lord. So God always is forming the leader before he's entrusting more to the leader. He's not going to put you in a situation where you're not prepared. He's going to also qualify you for what he's calling you into, right? God qualifies the called. So he's going to form you before he entrusts more to you. And this pattern appears over and over and over throughout scripture. So you can get a clue and embrace this pattern, right? David was anointed before he was crowned. Joseph dreamed before he learned how to govern. And the beautiful thing with Joseph, right? He had to dream. He had to learn to think big. He had to learn to think big so that he could be overseer and governor over much, right? Moses was hidden before he was delivered, right? He was hidden before he delivered, okay? And Jesus spent 30 years in preparation before 3 years of public ministry. That tells you, okay, especially if you're praying for some pretty big stuff, the level of formation that needs to happen on the front end. God will develop your character before influence, and that is mercy, right? He will develop integrity before promotion. So you already know what you're going to do, and you're decided on that, but in advance of a thing, right? He's going to give you wisdom before more responsibility, and he's going to help give you responsibilities that train you for the more that's coming and for the capacity building that's coming. He's going to give you faithfulness before he increases. He who trusts with little, he'll entrust with more, right? Identity will come before your assignment. Capacity will come before your impact, right? When you are building all this capacity, there will come a season where you understand what you were developing that all for in the first place. Trust me, right? We often pray, Lord, give me more. And the Lord says, let me build you so that you can handle that first, right? I'm making you able to carry more. I'm making you ready to carry more. We see this in Romans 12:2. Be transformed, changed by the entire renewal of your mind, which is really the entire renewal of your being. Notice the order there, though. Transformation, then discernment, then renewal, then clarity. So God doesn't simply just tell us where to go, okay? He changes how we think about that. He changes how we perceive that, what we know about that, because when your mind is renewed, you begin recognizing things that you couldn't see before. And this is crucial for how you navigate them. Isaiah 54:2 says, enlarge the place of your tent. Enlarge the place of your tent. This has always personally fascinated me. God tells them to enlarge, right? And so if you picture like a big wedding tent, those like big white wedding tents, you have to like pull them and stretch them as far as they can go so that that tent is really tight and so that it can cover all that it's designed to, take up all the space that it's designed to, right? So capacity here comes first, then expansion second. In other words, preparation first, promise second. So when we hear enlargement, we get amped because most people think that that's more resources, more followers, more influence, more something like that. But what it actually is you being prepared first. And so sometimes that looks like crushing, that looks like pruning, that looks like grief, that looks like being buried, right? That looks like you being trained in order to be fully ready for that promise. And that's the kingdom, okay? So I just want to encourage us and offer some prayer here. Lord, this is what you can ask. Lord, where have I outgrown my old thinking? Where have I outgrown my old thinking? Where have you been increasing my discernment? Maybe he's really talking to you. I know he does this a lot for me. Maybe he's really talking to you about a certain area. Maybe he's really deepening and enriching a certain area. Lean into that, right? Where am I mistaking stretching for settling? Maybe I thought that I was stuck when I'm not. I'm just being stretched. Or maybe I am stuck and I need to embrace the stretch. What capacity are you developing in me right now? And who are you forming in me before you entrust me with what's next? These are great things to sit down and just journal with the Holy Spirit. And I believe personally, especially because of these first few months of the year, like we're over halfway through, there's been many people that have gone through a lot of shifting. And it takes a ton of courage and the right kind of support to navigate and process a lot of that. And I believe that many people have been interpreting what they've been navigating as loss. Okay. But heaven, actually, the revelation that I've received on this is that heaven calls that enlargement. Heaven calls that enlargement, right? You've been grieving what no longer fits. Okay. But to keep that wouldn't necessarily be a blessing, right? Maybe you've been wondering why familiar places feel unfamiliar. In fact, like you want them to continue to be familiar to you, but that actually wouldn't be answering your prayer, right? Maybe you've been questioning why your appetite has changed because it was easier before you started disrupting the status quo, right? But the Lord, I really sense, is offering encouragement to those that can hear it, right? Really a reminder that he often changes your hunger before he changes your harvest. You know, there's some things that after you go through the seasons of pruning, of waiting, of healing, of warring, of refreshing, of whatever those things are, after you suffer a little while, you learn to see life differently. You learn to embrace relationship with God differently, right? And you start to see that it is just good wisdom to trust what God is doing. Right? You start to see that he does enlarge capacity before he's enlarging your assignment. And that's a good thing because he's beginning with the end in mind. So it's never that he is putting off or delaying something against you in a negative sense. Like he's actually got that in mind. He's just making sure that you're ready for it and the other elements connected to it are. He deepens your root before he broadens your influence. That makes sense, right? So you don't want to rush through the season simply because it feels uncomfortable. And that's the human tendency. In our soul, there's a lot of false urgency and there's a whole lot of rushing. But when you are certain of an outcome by faith, you can afford to wait and wait without anxiety. When you're waiting on the Lord, you're resting in the Lord in action. You're obeying God in real time, but the way you're moving through is rested. It is contentment. It is trust, right? And some of what has been called delay, or maybe you've even heard delay come out of your mouth, right? God is calling this preparation. Some of you have been experiencing confusion, but God is calling that formation. You would have thought that those were people that you could build with, and God needed you to see that you actually need to build like this. But until you matured into this, you wouldn't even been able to recognize who you could build with, right? And some of what you're calling an ending, okay, is actually the beginning of becoming the person who can faithfully carry everything you've been praying for, because God doesn't want you to just get it. He wants you to be able to sustain it. He wants you to be able to multiply it. He wants you to be able to take dominion over these territories. He wants you to govern, right? That's no small thing, none of that. So the invitation isn't simply to leave one season behind, okay? The invitation is to become the leader that your season requires, to lead well in the season that you're in, because that'll guarantee the season that you move into, right? And also prepare for the season that you're moving into. You don't develop capacity suddenly when you just get into the other season. You need to be building that and developing that and cultivating that now. So when you think about the season, it is normal. Like when you think about life, we're either growing or we're dying. So in many ways, you're not the same person. You're continuing to grow. You're continuing to evolve. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot right with that. But as you grow, things have to die. You have to die to yourself daily. You have to die to mindsets. You have to die to patterns. You have to die to belief systems. You have to die to relational dynamics that do not serve you and would wear you out if you took them forward, right? So there's a lot of things that you do, soulish things that you do have to die to, and you have to rise to things in Christ also. You have to be this leader of integrity, be this leader that is trustworthy, be this leader of excellence. You have to learn things, right? And embrace things that you haven't practiced before. You have to go to places that you've never been before and know how to step into them with honor and with wisdom and with discernment. And this is going to require all of your investment. And so God doesn't want you entangled and invested in things that would only hinder you over here, because that wouldn't be a good father. So my challenge to you is to think about how you can embrace growth. You can see and you can notice that you are growing and outgrowing a certain season, but how do you really lean into the season that you're in and embrace where it is that you're going? Not making it wrong for where you are, not talking yourself out of things, but a partnering and agreeing with God about what he says is possible for you. It is time to get your expectations up. It's time to believe bigger. It's time to demonstrate more fully and completely who you know Christ to be and what he has entrusted to you to be, to do, to have, and to really be about the difference that only you can make. That's going to require all of you. And I want to encourage you, if you want to be supported on a journey like this where it really gets real and it requires an incredible amount of courage and fortitude, Courage Co is where we do that kind of work, and we don't do it alone. There's all sorts of ways that you can grow and develop. On our most basic level, we do live training every single month. So Holy Detachment was our deep training. It was 2 hours and 40 minutes this month. It was a deep training this month. And then we also have our prophetic encouragement nights called Kingdom Builders every single month. So you can be a part of that, and you will get the replays for the entire month. You will get reflections, you will get homework, you get ways to keep deepening all of this on your journey. And it's live and active, so you get full support the entire month. So come join us in Courage Co. That's a great way to just receive mentorship and covering and prayer and get on the spot coaching live. Okay. And it's a great way to take information like this deeper and really work it out in your life. So I hope this blessed you. And until next